So, today we want to use this time together to grow and deepen our work in diversity and inclusion. We have two special guests. One will help us look outward at the demographics of the electorate in 2012 and what they mean for us looking forward. And the other will help us look inward at our mental models and unconscious biases. And following these two presentations, you'll have some time for discussion at your tables to pose questions to our guests. So, it's my great pleasure to now introduce you to Anita Estelle and Bo Young Lee. They're both right there. Anita, who's going to start first, is considered to be one of Washington, D.C.'s outstanding policy experts. She served as Chief of Staff to Dr. Jonetta B. Cole on the Clinton-Ford transition team, and as Senior Advisor to Education Secretary Richard Riley, where she coordinated the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. As staff to the House Appropriations Committee, she managed bills that authorized more than $1 trillion in federal programs. And so, I'm going to say a couple of words about Bo, and then we'll get started with Anita. Bo Young is the Global Diversity and Inclusion Practice Leader for the firm Diversity Best Practices. With over 15 years of experience as an internal diversity leader and as a consultant, she's helped clients like John Hancock, the Human Rights Campaign Foundation, John Deere, Pfizer, Boston Scientific, and Marriott International launch and facilitate diversity leadership councils, build metrics, diversity scorecards, and accountability models, and embed diversity and inclusion into broad HR processes, including performance. Anita's going to lead things off, and when she's finished, she's going to hand the baton to Bo. And then we'll invite you to spend a few minutes talking with colleagues around the two questions you'll find at your tables. And those questions are, what did you hear today that might imply new actions to take to your own orchestra? And what questions do you have for Anita and Bo? And then at the end, we'll invite you to share your questions or comments with Anita and Bo and all your colleagues in the room. So, without further ado, Anita, take it away.
I feel like I gave Jesse the hook. Sorry about that, Jesse. He just shared some profound and relevant remarks, so let's give him a hand for being a great speaker. You guys have to bear with me. I'm still a little hungover from last week's inauguration festivities. I had like 12 people spending the night in my home for days. So I'm finally recovering. And most of them were from New York. What a pleasure to be here. I want to acknowledge Jesse. I also like to thank Heather Noonan, Polly Kahn, and Jessica Balboni, and also my co-presenter, Bo Young Lee, for all the good conversations we've had and getting up to this point. I'm going to talk about the new majority, America's changing, and the changing demographics. As background, I do have extensive experience on appropriations, working for Bill Clinton, Secretary of Education, Dick Riley, Lou Stokes from Cleveland, Ohio, if there are any people from Cleveland here. I've worked with Detroit, all kinds of people across the country, and I'm just amazed at what I'm seeing on the landscape of America right now, and I'd like to talk with you about it just a little bit. So as an overview, we'll talk about the relevance of the new majority and changing demographics, the states that delivered the Electoral College affirmations and surprises, and how this affects diversity in the 113th Congress, potential meaningful questions for the orchestra community as a result of these developments, seemingly insurmountable dream realized. Here we'll talk about a little bit about the vision that Reverend Martin Luther King demonstrated and what it may mean for the orchestral community. The power of clear vision, what that means for your community. And then a final thought, change is certain. These photos demonstrate some of the changing diversity and the impact that it had on the election. You can see the color, you can see the texture of who we are, the gender. You can even see the language implications and how they played out and making sure that people had a place. All of these are polling stations. More specifically, what we know about the changing demographics is that it looks like what I call the rainbow coalition remix. You have women, Hispanics, blacks, Asians, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and what we call the young or the millennials. If you look at the number in terms of the relevance of the new majority, you'll see that in terms of gender, 55% of women voted for President Obama. This number represents single white women mainly. The married white women voted for Romney, interestingly. You see by race, you have the black vote, 93% Hispanic, and you see education, non-college graduates and college graduates leaning toward Obama. The age, people under 45 voted with the president, 45 and older went with Mr. Romney, and then also by income, people who made less than $50,000 a year. And these are the people that are increasingly comprising the new America, the face of new America. So even more specifically, you'll see that according to Gallup, the gender gap in 2012 election was the largest since the company began tracking the metric in 1952 by approximately 20 points, with Obama winning women by 12% and Romney winning men by 8%. Age and ethnicity, baby boomers and millennials contrasted dramatically in 2012. Again, he won 60% of the 18 to 29-year-old, while Governor Romney won 60% of voters 45 to 64 and older. Now, this is the real important part right here. Approximately 40% of millennials are non-white, and that number is rising in the following generation. While Americans older than 50 are currently approximately 76% white. So, and that number will drop as the millennials were older. Of course, those who are now elderly will start to die and move on, which has real implications for your community. Because the question is, who's going to be your performers, your administrators, and who are going to be your benefactors? And if the older white population starts to die off, as the younger, more diverse communities start to claim the majority, to what extent are we going to be able to involve with the activities of your community? And so by 2050, you'll see that 47% of the United States population will be white. In terms of economic inequality, you've heard from filmmaker Michael Moore. In 2009, he reported that the bottom 60% of US households owned only 2.3% of total US wealth. And I've corroborated and confirmed this data with other sources. So that's about $1.22 trillion. And if you look at the numbers, this amount is less than the estimated combined net worth of the individuals on the Forbes 400 list. That's really quite awful. Wouldn't you agree? I can't hear you. Wouldn't you? I'm engaging in this conversation. Let me just take a moment and let you know. I'm engaging in this conversation as a presenter, but I'm also engaging in this conversation as a stakeholder and a concerned citizen. That's why I'm here. And these numbers are to bring home a point, but they're also here to outline exactly the type of work that you and I have to do as the gatekeepers of this generation to turn this situation around. So I'm going to be calling on you for your input and your response, because if we don't get it together, who will, right? So that's why these numbers are here. It's not some cold, objective data that doesn't touch our realities in our lives. These numbers affect us. These trends affect us. And as leaders and stakeholders, I think we've got to roll up our sleeves and get busy. If you look at the middle class, President Obama really paid attention to this demographic. Those people, 30,000 to 100,000 annually, and he won this group by 51%. And the chart below shows that this demographic has been really important to the party winning elections. But again, we know that it's most of the people, it's a good number of the people what Governor Romney called for 47%. The battleground states. It was interesting, President Obama won 10 of these 11 states. No one thought he was going to do this, but he really used his resources and targeted these communities. Colorado, Florida, Iowa, Michigan, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Wisconsin. The only state that he won, the only one that he lost rather, was North Carolina. And just for the record, I'm neither a fan of the president necessarily, I'm a fan of the process. I'm a fan of freedom and democracy, so just for the record. Diversity in the 113th Congress. What we have now is 21 new women, 19 in the House, 5 in the Senate. This produced the largest class of new women since 1992, which was the year of the woman. The total number of women is 101, with 20 senators, 78 representatives, and 3 non-voting members. What a picture. You'll see Nancy Pelosi there in purple as the queen. White males will be, this is a really interesting change. It blows my mind. When I saw this, I was totally surprised. White males will be in the minority in the House Democratic Caucus for the first time in history. Wow. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal. You have 31 white females. You have African Americans, 42. You have 27 Hispanics and 11 Asians. White males total 89, and the other diverse groups represent 111 votes. So the majority of the Democratic voters in Congress come from this new majority that we're talking about. These are people that you're going to have to be working with to adopt the policies that Heather's working so diligently. Meaningful questions for the orchestra community. What steps must be taken to address the issues with diversity in your community and classical music community? How would the community benefit from successfully addressing these issues? And to what extent is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s exemplary model for setting a clear vision relevant to this community? How can we tailor Dr. King's model to the community's specific needs? At this point, I'd like to talk about the vision that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King articulated during his time here with us. August 28, 2013 will mark the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. This year also marks the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. And so you can see, I was talking with Polly before, and she said she was at the March on Washington and she remembers this speech. I think she said she was a few months old. And, but this is mind-boggling if you just look at how much we've accomplished in 50 years. And I was talking with Heather before, and I said, Heather, King and John Lewis and so many other people took billy clubs to the head, and look at what happened in 50 years. We have a black president twice in the United States. I don't quite understand. So the challenge is, will this community 50 years from now, will you be able to have a picture like that shows a change? Because to me, taking billy clubs to the head and being killed and tarred and feathered and hung by trees is a lot more serious than the challenges you face in this community. Incredible, incredible achievement in 50 years. In his speech, Dr. King demonstrated the power of a clear vision. This speech has been used by researchers at Harvard and a number of the business schools as a model business statement, as a model vision statement for business. Let's take a look at what he had to say. Can you all see that? If you don't mind, will you read it with me? Let's see what he said. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. So he said two things. First, the haves and the have-nots are going to sit down at a table and talk. That's the first thing we're going to do. And then he said, secondly, after we have that conversation, we're going to go into the desert. We're going to go into those communities where the people have been left out and where they're suffering and they're sweltering and they're isolated. And we're going to transform those deserts into oases. Sit down at a table, go into the desert. And then he said, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And so you see that dream materialized repeatedly in this election, with the president, with the people who turned out, and with the installment of his memorial in Washington, D.C. This man had a dream that was realized. It's profound. It's absolutely profound in 50 years. And those are his children. Incredible vision. Dr. King's vivid imagery evoked powerful emotions. Even more important, his futuristic pronouncements have come true. The 2012 elections demonstrate that the change that Dr. King described in his dream. Now, what's the dream for you? When we look at national developments on the political landscape, the nation's orchestra community is struggling still to diversify its talent pool. Everything in America is moving. Every other sector is moving, leaning forward into the change. I have a dream for you. Would you like to read it with me? I have a dream that one day the sons and daughters of former slaves and the sons and daughters of former slave owners and others will be able to sit down together and play in an orchestra proportional to their representation in the larger community. I have a dream that one day deserted and abandoned communities will be transformed into oases of education and opportunity. I have a dream that all children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by their ability and acumen. This is just a draft vision statement. It's going to be for you all to work on your own vision statement, but in talking with Polly and Heather and Jessica and others, I just felt like I had to do this, because if we can model the vision statement after what Dr. King did, and I know his dream came true, I know that the dreams that you have will come true also. But just as Dr. King set forth a powerful vision for unity and justice in the I Have a Dream speech, the orchestral community must create a vision that cultivates diversity and inclusion. And then, we must link arms, go into communities, and fight for greater opportunity for the marginalized and neglected. We've got to think it up, and then we've got to get busy. I love Einstein. He's one of my favorite people. Change is certain, for sure. Albert Einstein defined insanity as doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I leave you with this, and I leave you with this also. Thank you.
Dr. Chris Pulaski, I'm not with an orchestra, I'm an musician, but I know many orchestras have artistic excellence as part of their mission statement, and to be fair and seek the best, they have a blind audition process. And was just wondering what our panelists think about the blind audition process as it relates to achieving diversity.
That's a nice softball question to start off with. And let me just ask our two guests. You know what? Okay. And Anita, term familiar to you?
I think it's fine as long as we have a blind preparation process. And I think that's what we're missing. You know, you're assuming that all things are equal, that all people are having equal opportunity to access, to get instruments and to learn how to play and to learn the different songs and whatever and compositions, and that's just not true. And so basically you're excluding and ignoring and walking by a talent that has never been developed. So I think the real task is how do we go into communities, the real challenge, the real opportunity is how do we go into communities and identify this talent and groom it and nurture it and prepare it to participate in that blind process.
What she said. No, basically that's what I was, I was going to say the same thing is, we know that it takes a lifetime to get to that level, to even be able to be behind that screen. So what happens before they get there? And that's where the disparities are right now in our society. So that's really where you need to start looking. Sure.
Outside of music, I had an encounter with a brain surgeon about a year ago, and one of the best brain surgeons in the world, his name is Dr. Q. Dr. Q came from Mexicali, Mexico, across the United States border into California as an illegal migrant worker at the age of 15, 14, or 16. He lived in this awful trailer that, the camper that goes on trucks. They took it off the truck and put it on bricks, and they lived in it and worked in the fields of California. He went to community college. They saw that he had a propensity for math and science, and he ended up going to Berkeley and then went to Harvard Medical School. He now runs the tumor program at Johns Hopkins. I do not think playing a classical instrument is as difficult. It may be comparable to being a brain surgeon. But the point is that we have systems in the US that allow illegal migrant workers to be trained to be neurosurgeons. And I don't know if we have the same systems in place to train young people to be performers in the orchestra.
One final note. When you think about training those young children and finding that talent very early on, I want you to think beyond just access. Well, we gave them exposure. We started those programs because think about how our culture of how we actually train children to become musicians may be biased to our culture of preparation. Think about what we tell young children who have a gift for music. You must practice. If you practice and you put in the effort, the outcomes will be there. That is an entirely internal control perspective of the world. When you're talking to someone who's a Latino or an African American or someone who comes from a culture that is more oriented towards an external control focus, where the message is what will be. I can put in all the effort I want to, but if God doesn't will me to be a musician, to be a world-class musician, it's not going to happen. So maybe that message of internal control preparation is not the one that's going to motivate that child who comes from a more external control. Are there other ways of motivation? I was actually talking with the USTA, the U.S. Tennis Association, and they're dealing with the exact same issue of finding the young talent early on and saying, how do you train a young tennis player? It's actually an amazingly similar process to training a musician. It takes a lot of hours of practice, of dedication, and you have to start saying, is the way that we train them, is the way that we identify them culturally biased in one way or another? So it's not just about the access.
That's terrific. Two wonderful insights. Thank you.